Jake Murphy was elbow-deep in the guts of a malfunctioning air recycler on Space Station Beta 7, covered in lubricant that smelled like rotten eggs when 8 feet of nightmare came stalking down the corridor. Zara Vex was what humans politely called an apex predator. She had midnight black scales that absorbed light, razor-sharp claws, and a mouth full of teeth that belonged in a museum exhibit labeled, "Why Evolution Sometimes Has a Sense of Humor." Her yellow eyes glowed like headlights, and when she moved like liquid death with excellent posture. Today, however, liquid death looked frazzled. "Human Murphy," she growled in that voice like gravel in a blender. "I require assistance." In 2 years on Beta 7, Zara had never spoken to Jake directly. This was new. "Ah," Jake said eloquently. "Okay? I have cubs, 3 of them." She paused. "There is a crisis in the Vexenari system, a rebellion. I must return immediately, but I cannot bring cubs to a war zone. You will watch them." Jake stared at her. "Lady, I can barely keep a houseplant alive. You want me to babysit 3 miniature killing machines?" "Cubs are not killing machines," Zara said with wounded dignity. "They are learning machines, with very sharp teeth. Especially, but not better. You are human. Humans are known for their adaptability." She tilted her head. "You have not died yet. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement of my childcare skills." Zara whistled, a sound like steam escaping a punctured hull. 3 balls of black fur tumbled down the corridor like tiny furry cannonballs. About the size of large housecats, if housecats were born with switchblades for claws. Their eyes glowed the same predatory yellow as their mothers. "Razer, Fang, Tiny," Zara said, pointing to each cub. "This is Human Murphy. He will be your temporary guardian." One of them, Tiny, the largest, opened his mouth and made a sound like a garbage disposal trying to eat a chainsaw. "Is he trying to communicate?" Jake asked hopefully. "Eel is hungry. They are always hungry. Do not let them eat anything important." "What do they eat?" "Meat, metal, furniture, small mammals. They are not particularly discriminating." Jake felt his eye twitch. "Small mammals. You should be fine. You are a large mammal." Zara was already backing away. "I will return in 7 standard days. Try not to lose any of them." "Wait, what do I feed them? Where do they sleep? What if—" But Zara was gone. Jake looked down at the cubs. The cubs looked up at Jake. Razer took an experimental nibble at Jake's boot. "Well," Jake said, "this is going to end badly." The first thing the cubs did was eat Jake's door. Not the handle, the entire door. Jake watched in horrified fascination as Tiny gnawed through reinforced titanium alloy like chewy gum. "No," Jake said weakly. "Bad. Predator baby." Tiny looked up with glowing yellow eyes, titanium shavings stuck to his fangs, and made that garbage disposal sound again. Jake was beginning to think it might be laughter. While Tiny redecorated the entrance, Razer systematically destroyed Jake's maintenance tools. Fang had found Jake's pet goldfish. "No, no, no!" Jake lunged forward, scooping the bowl away. "Mr. Bubbles is off limits. He's got tenure." Fang gave Jake a look of pure betrayal. Jake sank into his remaining chair and tried to think. "Okay, let's approach this scientifically. You're babies. Baby humans need structure, routine, and attention to keep them from destroying everything." He paused. "Which they do anyway. So maybe you're not so different." He clapped his hands sharply. "Hey, cubs, attention!" 3 pairs of glowing eyes turned toward him. The destruction paused. "Rule 1, no eating the furniture. Rule 2, no eating my tools. Rule 3, definitely no eating Mr. Bubbles." Jake walked to his food synthesizer and produced protein rations. The cubs tried them and immediately spat them out, with expressions of pure disgust. Fang was eyeing Jake's leather tool belt. Jake sighed and tossed it on the floor. "Fine, knock yourselves out." All 3 descended like tiny piranhas. Within minutes, the belt was confetti, but they'd stopped destroying everything else. From his emergency locker, Jake pulled reinforced cargo cable, cut it into 3 pieces, and tossed them to the cubs. "Chew toys." The cubs examined the cables with the seriousness of wine critics, then began gnawing with thoughtful concentration. It was working. They were contained, occupied, and nobody was eating his door anymore. That's when his comm unit crackled. "Murphy, what the hell is going on? Sensors are showing massive vibrations from your sector." Jake looked at the cubs, now debating the merits of his spare blanket as a snack. "I'm babysitting." By day 3, Jake had learned that the cubs were solar-powered, sleeping only 2 hours at a time, and had no concept of personal property. But they were also following him around like lost puppies. It started when Jake went to fix a gravity generator. He'd left them with enrichment activities, scrap metal and cables. He figured wrong. Jake was recalibrating when he heard familiar chirping. All 3 cubs sat in a neat row, watching with intense concentration. "How did you get out? I locked the door." Tiny nudged a piece of twisted metal, his former door lock. For the next hour, Jake worked with an audience. When he needed a tool, one would nudge it toward him. When he dropped a bolt, Razer would retrieve it with retriever-like precision. It was weird, but kind of nice. The real breakthrough came during lunch. Jake had tried various synthesized foods without success. Out of desperation, he made a peanut butter sandwich. Halfway through, he noticed 3 pairs of eyes fixed on him with laser focus. "This is human food. You probably can't digest it." The whining was immediate and dramatic. Jake sighed. "Fine, but if this makes you sick, I'm not explaining it to your mother." He tore off 3 pieces. The reaction was immediate, reverent worship. From that point on, peanut butter sandwiches became universal currency. Want cubs to stop gnawing something? Offer sandwich. Need them to follow you? Wave bread. Post-meal food coma worked for sleep. Jake learned their personalities too. Razer was the leader and most curious. Fang was the troublemaker who figured out how to open supply lockers and reprogram the food synthesizer. Tiny, despite being largest and most intimidating, was the most cautious and protective. By day 4, they had routines. Morning meant breakfast, sandwiches with crusts cut off. Work time meant the cubs following Jake, acting as tool retrieval systems. Afternoons were enrichment in Cargo Bay 7, which Jake had turned into a playground with Torres's permission. The cubs loved hide-and-seek in cargo container mazes. Evenings were education, Jake reading technical manuals while they curled around his chair like furry space heaters. The breakthrough came on day 5 during the Great Cable Incident. Jake was running diagnostics on the communication array when a critical cable came loose in a maintenance shaft too narrow for him to fit through. The station would lose galactic contact without it. Razer nudged Jake's shoulder and pointed his nose at the shaft opening. "No way. Your mom would kill me if I sent you crawling around inside walls." Razer made an impatient sound, peered inside and chirped, "I've got this," more clearly than words. Jake hesitated. The shaft was safe. No moving parts, no electrical hazards. And Razer was definitely small enough. "You'd have to carry this micro-welder and connect it to the loose cable. Think you can do that?" Razer took the welder carefully in his mouth and disappeared into the shaft. For 10 minutes, Jake followed his progress through diagnostics, watching as systems came back online and connections reported successful. When Razer emerged, Jake was grinning. "You did it, you brilliant little monster." From his pocket, Jake pulled out a saved sandwich piece. "Here, you earned it." As Razer munched contentedly, Jake realized something that should have worried him more. He was actually enjoying this. Word was spreading around the station. Crew members found excuses to pass by, trying to glimpse the human managing to parent 3 baby apex predators without getting eaten. The betting pool had evolved from "when will Murphy die" to "what impossible thing will Murphy teach them next?" For the first time since Zara had dumped them on him, Jake was starting to think this might work out. Jake was teaching the cubs poker when the alarm went off. The bone-deep klaxon meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Red emergency lights bathed everything in hellish shadows. "Attention all personnel. The station is under attack. This is not a drill." The cubs went perfectly still, playful demeanor vanishing instantly. 3 pairs of yellow eyes tracked every sound, bodies coiled with sudden tension, low rumbling coming from all 3. "It's okay," Jake said. "We just need to get to the emergency shelter." Jake grabbed his kit and headed for the door. The cubs fell into formation, Razer at point, Tiny and Fang flanking. Like they'd drilled this maneuver. The corridors were chaos. Crew members ran in all directions. Jake could hear weapons fire in the distance. They were halfway to the shelter when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in, but that second of darkness was enough. Jake heard movement in the walls. The cubs heard it too, stopping dead and tilting their heads at identical angles. Then Razer made a sharp, urgent trill that made Jake's hair stand on end. 3 meters ahead, wall paneling exploded outward. Through smoke and debris stepped a Kraxan raider, built like a walking tank with 4 arms and an attitude problem. His species was banned from most civilized systems for eating their captives. The Kraxon spotted Jake and grinned, revealing 3 rows of serrated teeth. Human. Good. Humans make excellent hostages, very noisy when you hurt them. Look, Jake said, raising his hands. I'm just maintenance. How about we pretend you never saw me? I think not, little human. You come with Grok now. Grok took a step forward. That's when Teeny launched himself at the pirate's face. Jake had seen the cubs play fight, but this was violence with purpose. Tiny hit Grok square in the throat, claws extended, and the sound was between a scream and gurgle. But Tiny was still just a cub. One massive hand closed around his small body. Little beast, Grok snarled, blood running down his neck. Grok will eat you slowly. Jake moved without thinking, grabbing a plasma torch and lunging forward, triggering it at maximum output. The superheated beam caught Grak's wrist, and his roar echoed through the corridor. Grak dropped Tiny and swung at Jake with 3 arms. Jake ducked, rolled, scooped up Tiny, and ran. They reached the emergency shelter to find it sealed, capacity full. Of course, Jake panted. Razer tugged his pants leg, pointing down a side corridor toward Cargo Bay 7. Jake sealed the door behind them and leaned against it, heart hammering. But he could hear movement outside. Lots of movement. The cubs were moving with purpose around the bay, planning something. No, Jake said firmly. We hide. We wait. We do not engage heavily armed pirates. Razer gave him a look that conveyed, with all due respect, you're an idiot. Then the door exploded. 3 pirates entered, 2 Kraxons, and something like a cross between a spider and a bad attitude. They had energy weapons and the scars of survivors. What do we have here? Human with pets? Jake stepped protectively in front of the cubs. They're just babies. Whatever you want, take it. Leave them alone. The spider thing clicked its mandibles. These look like Vexnari cubs. Do you know what baby apex predators are worth on the black market? Jake's blood turned to ice. Of course, alien cubs would be incredibly valuable as pets or breeding stock. Over my dead body, Jake said. That can be arranged, the lead pirate replied, raising his weapon. Jake's training kicked in. Not combat training. He'd learned how 3 very smart, very deadly cubs thought and moved. Now! Jake shouted, diving left. The cubs exploded into coordinated motion. Razer went high, leaping between containers, drawing attention upward. Fang went low, slicing through weapon cables with his claws. Tiny had found the loading controls. Massive magnetic clamps disengaged with thunderous clangs. Tons of cargo began sliding as Tiny manipulated artificial gravity with engineering precision. The pirates fought while dodging falling containers and shifting gravity. Jake, who'd learned to navigate the cubs' obstacle courses, moved through chaos like he'd been born to it. When smoke cleared, 2 pirates were unconscious under shipping containers, and the 3rd hung upside down from the ceiling, wrapped in loading cables. Jake stood breathing hard, looking at 3 cubs, sitting in a neat row, extremely pleased with themselves. Holy hell, he said. We actually won. His comm crackled. Murphy, what's your status? We're showing massive gravitational anomalies. Jake looked around the tornado-hit cargo bay. Status is... stable. We've got 3 pirates contained and ready for pickup. Murphy, did you just say you captured 3 pirates? Jake looked at the cubs. We captured 3 pirates. It was a team effort. Zara returned exactly 7 days later, just as promised. She found them in Cargo Bay 7, where the cubs were playing advanced hide and seek, involving stealth strategy and occasionally rewiring the lighting system. Jake was dealing poker cards when the door hissed open. 3 pairs of yellow eyes snapped toward the entrance. Zara stood there, still imposing but tired. New scars marked her arms, scales dulled with exhaustion. The political situation had been messier than anticipated. Her glowing eyes swept the bay, taking in modified lighting, container obstacle courses, destroyed then repaired equipment. Then her gaze landed on her cubs, who sat in perfect line, cards held in their mouths, staring at their mother with guilty expressions. The silence stretched. Jake cleared his throat. Welcome back? Zara stepped inside, movements cautious. My cubs are alive. Yeah, about that. I'm intact. More than intact, they look healthy, well socialized, disciplined. She studied them with scientific intensity. Razer, come. Razer looked at his mother, then Jake, then back, making a questioning sound. It's okay, Jake said gently. Go see your mom. Razer padded over, but instead of exuberant reunion sat at her feet with polite attention, waiting for instructions. Zara stared down. He is waiting for permission. Yeah, they're pretty well behaved now. Mostly. They still eat furniture sometimes, but they ask first. Ask? Zara's voice went quiet. They ask permission to eat furniture? They'll bring me whatever they want to chew and wait for yes or no. It's actually efficient. Zora looked at Jake like he'd claimed to teach quantum physics. Fang, display your hunting posture. Fang dropped into perfect stalking crouch, controlled and lethal, but then looked at Jake, as if asking whether this was correct. Jake nodded. Good form. Remember to keep your weight centered like we practiced. Like you practiced, Zara repeated slowly. We've been working on their technique. Natural hunters, but their coordination needed work. We set up training exercises with the containers. Jake gestured at the elaborate maze. Started simple, but they picked up fast. Now they navigate complex three-dimensional environments, work as coordinated teams, adapt tactics based on changing conditions. Zara examined the setup with professional interest. Military-grade training, using shipping containers as obstacles, with scratched alien script marking optimal attack vectors and escape routes. These are tactical notations, she said barely above a whisper. They are marking strategic positions. How did you teach them this? I didn't. They started doing it around day 4. I figured it was alien doodling. Piece markings indicate strategic thinking. Most adult Vexnari do not achieve until their 3rd molting. My cubs are not yet old enough for their 1st molting. Tiny chirped and nudged her leg, carrying a plasma torch from Jake's kit. Oh, that's from yesterday. We had a little incident with pirates. The cubs helped me deal with it. Zara went very still. Pirates. Nothing serious, just some raiders who thought they could take hostages. The cubs weren't having any of that. You should have seen them work together, like watching a tactical manual come to life. You fought pirates. With my cubs. Technically, the cubs fought the pirates. I mostly tried not to get in their way. 3 pirates, all captured alive. Security was impressed. Show me, Zara said finally. Show you what? Show me how they fight. Jake glanced at the cubs, watching with intense interest. I don't know if that's a good idea. Show me. Jake sighed. Okay. Cubs, demonstration only. No actual combat. The cubs moved with fluid coordination of a drilled unit. Razer took high ground, scaling containers with impossible speed. Fang disappeared into shadows so quietly even Jake lost track. Tiny positioned himself at the central choke point. Within 30 seconds, they'd established overlapping fields of fire, multiple escape routes, and a perfect kill box. They usually do this faster, Jake said apologetically. But they're showing off. Zara opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No sound came out. The thing is, Jake continued, gathering scattered cards, they're not just physically coordinated, they think collectively. When planning against the pirates, they shared information real-time, adjusting tactics based on what each observed, like a hive mind, except each individual makes independent decisions. That is not possible. Vexnari cubs do not develop pack consciousness until maturity. Maybe they developed it early because they needed to adapt, stuck with a human who didn't know the first thing about raising apex predators. They probably had to get creative. Razer chirped from his container perch and made complex sounds. Fang emerged, adding commentary. Tiny rumbled conversationally. They discussing tactical modifications, Zar translated automatically. Razer suggests elevated positions are too exposed for sustained defense. Fang believes shadow approaches work better against multiple opponents. Tiny is analyzing structural integrity of containers as potential weapons. Jake nodded. They've been having those conversations all week. I don't understand words, but I can follow the logic, always trying to improve their methods. Human Murphy, Zara said slowly, do you understand what you have done? Jake looked at the cubs approaching for customary post-exercise snacks. I kept them fed, healthy, and entertained for a week? You have created something that should not exist. A pack-bonded Vexnari unit with accelerated tactical development and cross-species loyalty. Military commanders across the galaxy would kill for soldiers like this. Jake pulled out peanut butter sandwiches and began distribution. They're not soldiers, they're kids. Really smart, occasionally terrifying kids, but still kids. Tiny settled next to Jake's leg, purring like a diesel engine. Fang curled up on his other side. Razer maintained dignified leader persona for 30 seconds before joining the group cuddle. Zara watched with the expression of someone whose worldview had been turned upside down. They have bonded to you. Completely. Irrevocably. Yeah, I figured that out around day 3. Is that a problem? Zara studied the scene. Her cubs, who should have been wild, barely trainable predators, behaving like the most well-adjusted children in the galaxy, utterly devoted to the human who'd figured out how to parent them. A problem, yes. It is going to be a very large problem. Jake looked up, suddenly worried. What kind of problem? The kind involving military recruiters, government scientists, and people who use words like unprecedented strategic asset in casual conversation. Jake felt his stomach drop. They want to take the cubs? Human Murphy, you have accidentally created the most effective small unit tactical team in known space, using children. My children! Do you have any idea how many species would go to war over access to training methods that can produce results like this? But I didn't really train them. I just kept them busy, fed them sandwiches, played games. You played games that taught advanced tactical coordination, strategic thinking, and cross-species communication. Games that accelerated their development by approximately 4 years. Jake looked at the cubs, listening with obvious intelligence. Razer made a soft, questioning sound, and Jake reached out to scratch behind his ears. It's okay, buddy, we're just talking. Just talking, Zara said, hysteria creeping in. He says we are just talking, while demonstrating the exact kind of interspecies emotional bond that military psychologists have been trying to weaponize for centuries. Weaponize? Jake's voice went sharp. Nobody's weaponizing anything. These are kids, not weapons. To you, they are kids. To certain elements of the galactic community, they are proof that humans possess supernatural ability to create loyalty and tactical excellence in other species. That's ridiculous. Is it? In 7 days, you took 3 untrainable predator cubs and turned them into a cohesive unit that can outthink most adult military squads. Without formal training, without understanding their biology, without speaking their language. How do you explain that? Jake thought about it, really thought, trying to see from outside perspective. 3 alien cubs who should have been impossible to control, now sitting quietly following his lead. Successful defense against armed pirates. Strategic thinking that impressed a professional warrior. When he put it like that, it did sound impossible. I don't know, he said finally. I just treated them like kids. Set boundaries, gave them structure, made sure they felt safe. Isn't that what any parent would do? Any human parent, perhaps. But that is precisely the problem. What you did should not work on Vexnari cubs. Our young are raised through competition and dominance hierarchies, learned through conflict and survival pressure. Your methods should have produced weak, confused cubs. She gestured at her offspring, now playing elaborate games involving card architecture while maintaining perfect tactical awareness. Instead, they are stronger, smarter, and more adaptable than any cubs I have ever seen. And they have formed emotional attachment transcending species boundaries. So what happens now? Now, said a new voice from the doorway, we have a very interesting conversation. Jake turned to see Commander Torres entering, followed by 2 strangers. One was human, wearing an expensive government suit. The other looked like an octopus crossed with a filing cabinet. The cubs immediately went defensive, flowing into positions giving maximum coverage of new threats. So smooth, Jake almost missed it. But they were ready to turn the bay very unpleasant for uninvited guests. Easy, Jake said quietly, and the cubs relaxed fractionally, still alert, still ready, but no longer preparing for violence. The suit-wearing human noticed and made notes on a tablet. Fascinating. Verbal de-escalation commands across species barriers. Dr. Vex was correct about the unprecedented nature of this development. Dr. Vex? Jake looked at Zara. You called them? I sent a preliminary report to the Interspecies Development Council. It is required when there are unusual circumstances involving military-age offspring. Military age? They're babies. Not anymore, the filing cabinet said in a voice like rustling papers. Tactical analysis suggests these cubs have achieved cognitive and strategic development, equivalent to adult military specialists. They represent significant advancement in interspecies cooperation methodology. Jake felt anger building. They represent 3 kids who've been through enough stress for 1 week. They don't need to be poked and prodded by scientists. The human official stepped forward. Mr. Murphy, I'm Director Hawthorne from the Interspecies Relations Bureau. We're not here to harm anyone. We're here because what you've accomplished could change the nature of galactic cooperation. I didn't accomplish anything except keeping 3 kids fed and entertained. Exactly, Hawthorne said with awe. You did what dozens of trained xenobiologists, military advisors, and child development specialists said was impossible, using nothing but basic human parenting instincts. Razer made a soft sound and pressed against Jake's leg. The message was clear. Whatever these strangers wanted, Razer was on Jake's side. The question is whether you'd be willing to help us understand how you did it. Jake looked down at Razer, then the other cubs flanking him protectively. Understand it, how? We'd like to offer you a position. Head of the new Interspecies Childhood Development Program. Your job would be studying what you did here and developing training protocols for galaxy-wide use. Training protocols? To create more tactical units like this? To create better understanding between species, the filing cabinet corrected. To prove cooperation is possible even between natural enemies. To show that bonds you've formed can be replicated. Jake was quiet, thinking about everything leading to this point. The chaos of the first day, gradual trust building, realizing the cubs weren't just tolerating him but actually caring. How they'd worked together against pirates, protecting each other and him with absolute dedication. What about them? Jake asked, nodding toward the cubs. What happens to Razer, Fang, and Tiny? They would come with you, naturally, as part of the research program. We'd need to study long-term development of the bonding process. Study them, like lab rats. Like the unprecedented success story they are, Mr. Murphy. These cubs could be the first of a new kind of interspecies cooperation. Imagine what we could accomplish if we could replicate this bond across different species, different worlds. Jake looked at Zara, unusually quiet during this exchange. What do you think? I think my cubs have chosen their pack leader, and it is not me. The words hung like a challenge. Jake could see the truth in the cubs' positioning, how they watched him for cues, how they'd defended him without being asked. They're not choosing a pack leader, Jake said. They're choosing a family. Family, Tiny rumbled, and Jake startled. First time any cub had attempted human speech. Family, Razer agreed, pronunciation careful but clear. Family, Fang added. Jake felt something tight in his chest loosen. Yeah, guys, family. He looked up at assembled officials, politicians, and scientists staring at the cubs with expressions of wonder, greed, or calculation. Here's the deal. I'll take your job. I'll help you figure out how to build better relationships between species, but we do it on my terms. Hawthorne leaned forward. Which are? First, the cubs aren't research subjects. They're family. They get treated like individuals, not specimens. Agreed. Second, any training protocols we develop focus on cooperation and understanding, not military applications. This isn't about creating super soldiers. It's about proving different species can care about each other. Agreed. Third, Jake's voice got stronger. We do this together, all of us. Zara included. If you want to understand how this worked, you need to understand it wasn't just human instincts. It was about respecting what these cubs are and helping them become what they're meant to be. Zara looked surprised. You would want me involved? They're your kids. I may have figured out how to babysit them, but you're their mom. They need both of us. And fourth, we remember that the point is proving the galaxy is better when different species work together instead of trying to dominate each other. The moment this becomes about creating advantages for one group over another, I'm out. Hawthorne considered, then nodded. I think we can work with those terms. Jake looked down at the cubs watching this negotiation with obvious intelligence. What do you guys think? Want to be part of something bigger? Razer made a sound that was definitely agreement. Fang chirped excitedly. Tiny just pressed closer to Jake's leg and rumbled contentedly. I think that's a yes, Jake said. 6 months later, Jake found himself in a purpose-built facility on Kepler Station, watching mixed-species youngsters work together on problem-solving exercises. Human children, vexnary cubs, young Alterians with crystalline exoskeletons, and juveniles from species he was still learning about. They were building something that might have been art or defensive structure, doing it together, communicating in mixed languages, gestures, and emotional telepathy. Razer, now larger and bearing ceremonial scars of his first molting, acted as team leader with natural authority that made professional diplomats weep with envy. Fang had discovered talent for cross-species communication, currently explaining something complex using chirps, sand scratches, and interpretive dance. Tiny had appointed himself chief protector, keeping watch while maintaining running commentary on structural engineering principles. It's working, Zara said, settling beside Jake. She still moved like a predator, but one who had better things to do than hunt. Yeah, Jake said, grinning as he watched a human girl teach a Vexnari cub to braid friendship bracelets. It really is. The Council is calling for expanded programs on 12 worlds. Applications are coming in faster than we can process them. Everyone wants to know how to replicate the Murphy method. There is no Murphy method, Jake said, accepting a badly braided bracelet from the human girl. There's just paying attention, treating kids like individuals, remembering that every species wants the same basic things for their children. Safety, growth, and the chance to become something greater than what they were born to be, Zara agreed. It had become their program's motto. Speaking of which, I got a message from Commander Torres. 3 more pirate raids have been stopped by mixed species crews trained in what the military calls cooperative tactical response. Apparently, pirates really don't know how to deal with opponents who actually communicate. Jake watched Tiny carefully guide a young Altarian through a complex engineering problem, showing the same patience Jake had used teaching cubs to play poker. You know what the really amazing thing is? What? We're not special. What we did, what these kids are doing, it's not some kind of miracle. It's just what happens when you treat people like people, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. Zara was quiet, watching her sons work with their mixed species pack, with easy cooperation that had taken galactic diplomats centuries to achieve. Perhaps, she said finally, that is what makes it miraculous. Jake had to admit she had a point. As if summoned by their conversation, Razer padded over and presented Jake with something that looked like a cross between sculpture and tactical manual. The other children had gathered around, all looking pleased with themselves. "What's this?" Jake asked. "Family," Razer said, in careful, precise standard. "All species. Together." Jake looked at the sculpture manual thing. It appeared to be a 3-dimensional representation of different species working together, but also clearly a tactical guide for coordination between different types of beings. It was exactly what you'd expect from children raised to see cooperation and strategic thinking as the same thing. "It's beautiful," Jake said, and meant it. As children dispersed to clean up, a process involving efficient teamwork that would make military drill sergeants weep, Jake reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. He'd started as a maintenance engineer who couldn't keep a houseplant alive. Now he was apparently the galaxy's foremost expert on interspecies child development, head of a program revolutionizing how different species interacted, an adoptive father of 3 of the most tactically advanced cubs in known space. Not how he'd expected his life to go. But watching Tiny help a young human child reach something high, while Fang translated instructions between 3 species and Razer mediated a toy dispute with seasoned ambassador diplomatic skills, Jake couldn't imagine wanting to be anywhere else. "Hey kids," he called. "Who wants peanut butter sandwiches?" The response was immediate and universal, a chorus of agreement in 6 different languages that somehow harmonized into something that sounded like pure joy. Jake grinned and headed for the kitchen. Some things, he'd discovered, were truly universal. And if that wasn't worth celebrating with sandwiches, he didn't know what was.